America's center of power changed, and with it, the dynamics of the political landscape. The consequences will reverberate locally, in Florida, on Capitol Hill, and on the global stage. Voters demanded change on the issues that mattered most: the economy, immigration, and social issues. Now, News4JAX goes beyond the headlines with political analysts who provide unique context and perspective. Experts focused on the issues making headlines. This is Politics and Power.
He is the world's richest man. He is also the president's largest campaign benefactor. His companies have grown on government contracts, and he is calling a lot of the shots in Washington. Elon Musk. Musk and his allies spent the last couple of weeks tearing through Washington, causing confusion, causing chaos in government agencies. He is an unelected businessman. Among the questions begging to be asked, how can he wield that kind of power? How can he run roughshod over laws and programs set up by Congress? There are obvious conflicts of interest. Why are they not being questioned? We, the people, are supposed to know about the people who run government, aren't we? Joining me on Politics and Power, political analyst Michael Binder. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, Michael, he has wide latitude to slash spending and make changes to the federal government, way it operates. And he is doing it at a rapid, even breakneck speed. There have been legal challenges, but many have fallen through. How's this happening?
Well, I think the important thing to consider is, yes, he's unelected, but he's granted authority by the president. And right now, the president has an exceptionally compliant Senate and House of Representatives, and everybody's letting him do what he wants. And until that changes, you're going to see this continue.
So we know that there's a Republican majority, but people are saying, you know, there are Democrats in the Senate. I know they don't have a majority, but they're not doing their job. They should be questioning, and they're ignoring the courts.
Sure. Well, I mean, the Democrats are doing what they can in the Senate, but at this point, it's limited, right? You've seen all the confirmation hearings. Yes, Democrats are voting against the vast majority of Trump's appointees. It doesn't matter. The Republicans outnumber them. So same thing here. Granted, this wasn't an appointment process that ran through the Senate. So the Democrats can't do anything about it. They can stomp their feet and raise hell, and they're doing a little bit about that, but it doesn't prevent any of these things from happening.
We'll get to the fact that they have a lack of respect for what the courts order in just a bit. So the Department of Government Efficiency has control of the Treasury Department's payment system, DOGE. It's financial waterworks, a spigot. System sends out trillions of dollars each year. Your Social Security payments, federal salaries are funneled through this portal. And that means there's sensitive data on there, like your Social Security number. That alone should raise concerns. Senator Elizabeth Warren said, controlling the system could allow the Trump administration to unilaterally and illegally cut off payments for millions of you, putting at risk the financial security of families and businesses based on political favoritism or the whims of Mr. Musk and those on his team who have worked their way inside. She went one step further, could also give them access to millions of Americans' personal and financial information that's protected by law. Now, I know the Treasury Department is trying to assuage fears, saying the access is read-only, but why don't people find this more concerning?
Well, I think some people do find it concerning, and there has been an uptick in concerns about this, particularly the privacy aspect and the idea that a private businessman who has a wide network of businesses, particularly if you think about what he's doing with X, formerly known as Twitter, access to people's information. And that, in a lot of ways, in 21st century America and the world, is currency. And does he take this and turn it into currency? Does he benefit directly from these things? It's yet to be determined, but it's certainly a fear, and it's certainly something people are concerned about. The idea that you're in there and you have access to how people get paid their Social Security checks. Well, what happens if you were a supporter of the former presidents, Mr. Biden? Does you maybe not get a Social Security check next month? Those things are all possible. Hasn't happened yet, but those are the fears that people are voicing.
Well, we know that, promises are being made to people, and there are worries that those promises aren't going to be fulfilled. We know that there's fear of retribution. So what do we believe?
I mean, you believe what you see, and it's a matter of time before something traumatic happens. If this continues, right, if Elon Musk is continuing this rampage, if you will, through government, it's one thing to put a pause on some grants that, most Americans don't really know the impact of. It's one thing to, we're rooting out all this unnecessary spending. You can have conversations about whether that's true or not, or whether it's meaningful. You start messing with Social Security, you start messing with Medicare payments. Suddenly, it's not just the libtard Democrats that are getting angry. It's regular, everyday Americans across the political spectrum. And if that happens, things will change dramatically.
But by the time we find out, it's too late.
Absolutely. And that's usually the case.
So people have to start asking questions, but they're not.
Sure. Well, people are asking questions.
They're asking questions, but they're not getting the answers.
But the wrong side of the aisle is asking questions. Mm-hmm. Democrats can ask all the questions they want. Right now, they don't have control of the executive branch. They don't have control of the Senate or the House or the courts, in the sense that the Supreme Court, there are obviously federal justices that have been appointed by Democrats. But unless you have control over the levers of government, there's really not a lot you can do unless you get the people on your side.
But look, anytime anybody asks serious questions, just trying to find out answers, they get bullied and they shut down.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, that's people are going to go, look, you're taking a partisan stance here, but that's the Trump way, and he's getting away with it.
Sure. And listen, this is something that he's been very good at. We can look locally here in Florida and draw a comparison. You're the bully until you're not. Much like DeSantis has been the bully in Florida for a couple of years in Tallahassee, suddenly the legislature coalesced, they stood up, and lo and behold, now they have a say in a much more equal relationship. We're going to see how this plays out over the next week particularly, but even through session the next couple of months. These things are all tied in. Yes, you can be a bully, much like in the schoolyard, but until everybody stands up and stands up together, you're going to continue to be that bully.
All right, well, let's use the example that you just put forth, okay? They sat back and they said, okay, Ron DeSantis, you know what? We're going to play the ball game our way, but now they just came back, as a matter of fact, today, and they said, all right, we're going to have another special session on immigration. Did they really go ahead and bow to Ron DeSantis? Because he's getting his way.
He's not getting his way entirely, right? He wanted this entire immigration bill to be housed under his office. Now it's housed under the offices of all of the elected.
Yeah, but what they, look, you know as well as I do, what they come away with is pretty much going to be what he wants. It's going to pretty much mirror what the Trump administration wants.
But that wasn't that different than what they
police
said. That wasn't that different than what the legislators wanted as well. The differences were minor, right? They're all in agreement on the end goal. They're all Republicans here, right? They're fighting over very small things. But the idea that the legislature stood up and said no to him at all is enormous. They haven't done it in years. So it's going to change the dynamic in Tallahassee, and suddenly, instead of him just ordering edicts, he's going to have to at least have some type of back and forth with the state legislature.
All right, so they're laying down some of the ground rules.
Right, and in D.C., Trump is just laying edicts right now. The Senate and the House are not standing up. They are not doing anything. Now, what happens when it comes to the new federal budget and that process, that's a different story. We'll see what happens there. But initially, he's running roughshod.
Right, and he's not getting that one big, beautiful bill. That's the one thing that Congress does have control over right now.
It does, and this is where Democrats do have some ability. If they can stick together and vote no on these things, they can really slow down the process, particularly in the House, where the Republicans have a very, very small majority, or in the Senate, where they can work with the filibuster to some extent, depending upon the process that they go through.
What do you think is going to happen when it comes to funding government? Because if they don't come up with the money, government could come to a grinding halt, and that's a big point of contention in Congress right now.
Right, and it's going to be very difficult for Trump and the Republicans to point the finger at Democrats and say this is their fault when they have control over all three branches. So if the government does get shut down and suddenly people can't go to national parks and suddenly things aren't open that need to be open, suddenly applying for a passport is stopped, all those types of things that people don't think much of when it comes to government, but when they need them, it's really important that they're there. That's when you might see some public tide turn against the current administration.
Yeah, the clock's ticking on that. Why don't people talk about the issues about the mass firing, the steep spending cuts, offers of retirement for federal employees? This man is taking a wrecking ball to federal government. Is this really the mandate that voters wanted?
I think it's certainly a mandate from some voters, certainly. If you look out, there's people that think all these folks are crooks, all politicians are crooks. Government's rigged against me. Burn it down. I might disagree with a lot of those statements. I think most people in government are decent people. I think, government is designed in a chaotic society to generally help us advance. But there's a lot of people that feel that way. They might not understand the value of the government and the different things that now are being a wrecking ball, taken to the term you used, and what some of the implications of that might ultimately be.
Nobody's going to argue that changes need to be made, but I don't know about a wrecking ball. Does the American public really have a clue what's going on and the impact that it might have? They hear what's going on.
Sure.
Do they understand the impact?
A lot of this is might impact, right? We don't know for sure all these terrible things are going to occur. It's possible that they do, but it's possible that they don't, right? It's possible that the injunctions that have been put against a lot of these things that Trump has tried to do ultimately hold and nothing happens. It's possible that some of the folks that took that opportunity to leave as a federal worker and get paid through September, that they leave happily, take their checks and go home, and it just calls the workforce, and he gets to either have a limited workforce or simply replace it with loyalists, something 150 years ago we went out of our way to try and avoid because of you don't want the whiplash in government. But until bad things happen, most people aren't going to pay attention or care. Listen, there were people sounding the alarm bells in the early 2000s about the free spending when it came to giving away mortgages and how mortgages were traded and they weren't really particularly secured. Nobody cared or paid any attention until it was too late. I would imagine that would be the same circumstance here today.
And by the way, this is not the first time this happened. If I remember my history right, it happened with Andrew Jackson. It happened with Dulles during the Eisenhower administration, right?
Sure. I mean, this is not new, right? I mean, prior to the 1870s, all of these positions were essentially political appointees. Pendleton Act changed some of that for good reason, right? We want professionals doing the business of government, right? You don't want whether or not you get your Social Security check or you get your Medicare procedure approved based on the whims of whether or not you supported a political candidate. We'll see ultimately how this plays out, but you're certainly correct that there is writing on the wall that this could all go very badly.
All right, so what we alluded to just a little bit ago, federal judges have halted Trump's sweeping orders to reshape the U.S. government, issued a number of rulings blocking the plans from going forward. Dozens of lawsuits have been filed. Vice President J.D. Vance just the other day said they are going too far, meaning the courts, challenging the courts. He posted on X, judges are not allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. He is suggesting the judges are acting illegally. Doesn't he understand there are three branches of government?
Well, I certainly think he does. I think he'd prefer, since he's in control of one of them, that only one maybe is a little bit ahead of the others. And that makes perfect sense, that he'd want to not be bothered by the courts and they can just do what they want. Listen, it won't be the first time that a president has ignored an order by a court. We haven't had it in a long time, at least not on a grand level like this, where it's playing out in the news on a daily basis. But we'll see. The idea that what Trump is doing is completely legitimate is exceptionally questionable. So people are going to have their opportunity to hear that. I imagine some of this is going to get to the Supreme Court. It hasn't yet. A lot of these things have been dealt with at federal district courts. Once they make their way to the Supreme Court, and whether or not Trump ignores it, whether you talked about Andrew Jackson, whether he does a, hey, Mr. Marshall made his decision, let him enforce it type of situation, we're not there yet. Hopefully we don't get to that point, but those are things that people have legitimate concerns about.
That raises a whole nother question because it becomes a big test for John Roberts.
Big test for John Roberts, how it gets navigated, and also a big test for Congress. Where do their loyalties lie? Do they lie with the interpretation of the Constitution by a number of justices that they confirmed, or do they lie with potentially a Trump administration that maybe is flouting what the Supreme Court ultimately says?
All right, from the issue of judicial oversight, let's take this one step further. Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller called the ruling an assault on the very idea of democracy itself. Who's the one stepping on democracy here?
Well,
that's a loaded question.
I mean, the idea of democracy, democracy is great if it's doing what you want it to do, and I think everybody feels that way. The problem with democracy and a representative democracy like we have here is what happens when the majority wants something else, or what happens when, in our country, we have rights of the minority built in and protections for them. What happens when they start to get trampled? Even though maybe 51% of people want something, what happens when we have built-in protections for minorities? And I'm not talking about racial or ethnic minorities. I'm talking about preference minorities. Those things are built into and embedded into our democracy as well, too.
I want you to hear what he said. We're not talking about racial minorities. We're not talking about ethnic minorities. We're talking about preference minorities. So before you write me, understand that. Representative Jerry Connolly, a ranking member of the House Committee on Government Oversight and Reform, put it this way. This guy who says he's your champion has hired a billionaire from South Africa who doesn't give a damn about you or your family and is proving it every hour of the day. He will prove to be profoundly unpopular with the public and will be an albatross around Trump's neck. That simple?
Potentially. The problem is that takes time, right? He's not there yet. Musk's popularity is not what it was prior to the inauguration. It has dipped, and understandably so, and it will continue to. He's not the most likable of people. Billionaires generally tend not to be, but he adds to that, and he's polarizing. Is he as polarizing as Trump? No, but is he working his way in that direction? Yes. Now, does Trump sever himself from Elon Musk at some point in the future? And I think everybody thinks that answer is yes. The question is when and under what circumstances. And is it just a matter of Trump getting tired of Musk taking the spotlight? We all know how Trump feels.
You mean like that Time magazine photo, which we will talk about.
Is that what does it? Or is it a policy situation where maybe Susie Wiles steps in and says, hey, this guy's more of a problem than he's worth?
And word is that Susie Wiles does have a bit of a harness on him, which is something we'll also talk about. You know, this is not as simple as it looks on the surface. So when Politics and Power continues, obvious conflicts of interest, buying influence during the election to growing his own business through government contracts. Musk crossing the line? How is he getting away with it? And does he have the power to change history? Political analyst Michael Binder and I be right back after this. Welcome back to Politics and Power. I'm Bruce Hamilton, along with my political guest, political analyst Michael Binder. I feel the email coming in, by the way. Let's tackle the obvious conflicts of interest first. Musk spending more than $290 million on the 2024 election. Yes, I can back it up. Federal election filings show the money was spent in an effort to boost President Trump's chances at re-election, as well as securing spots for other Republicans. Let's tackle the obvious conflict of interest first. He spent more than $290 million on the election itself. Money was spent in an effort to boost his chances at being in the White House again, as well as securing spots for the others. The filings show Musk put more than $11 million into his main super PAC. Money was earmarked for petition incentives. The incentives were meant to drive voter registration. There's also evidence he was jockeying for influence. All you have to do is look at those commission filings. He put more than that money in his money that was for the incentives. In the end, if you look at the big picture, most of the money he spent went to supporting Mr. Trump. Is there any doubt where we see Elon Musk firmly rooted in everything Trump does and ready to reap a substantial return on his investment? Yeah. Was he buying influence?
Sure.
Any doubt there?
No, but this is not unique to him. The sum of money might be unique, right? Most people don't drop more than $250 million into presidential campaigns, but regularly people donate with the sole express purpose of gaining access and influence.
But there are limits on how much you can donate to a campaign.
Not really, no. I mean, there's limits on how much I can write as a check from Mike Binder to political candidate X or Y. But when it comes to political action committees and 501c4s, and there's a lot of different ways you can dump money into political campaigns because, as our Supreme Court has suggested, that money is speech and speech is not limitable. There are a bunch of different ways to funnel a ton of money into campaigns.
So when you donate that kind of money to a U.S. candidate, U.S. political action committees, but you're also trying to influence elections in the U.K., in Germany, and other European nations, isn't that worrisome?
Certainly. You talk about the money that Musk donated. It's not just that, right? It's his control over his Twitter or X platform. You know, the algorithms
controlling messages.
Controlled messages dramatically, not just here in the States, but as you alluded to, elsewhere across the world. That's a real troublesome, if you're thinking about democracy with a little d, that's a troublesome concern. Information we get, how we get it, where we get it from is so vitally important. And if it's being manipulated, if it's being altered, if it's being given to us in a certain light, or only some information is making its way through all of the noise to reach us, yeah, that should absolutely be concerning, not only for Americans, but for citizens across the world.
And that plays into the bigger picture here. Yeah, Canada should be the 51st state. Yeah, we should control the Panama Canal. Yeah, you know what? Greenland, it should be ours. I mean, we've never heard that in modern day history, we've never heard that kind of talk.
Manifest destiny in this country is nothing new, right? From sea to shining sea. This is dating back 100 plus, 150 years when we're doing these kinds of things. It's been a long time since we started annexing states. I'm pretty confident that Canada's not going to be the 51st state. I'm also pretty confident that Greenland's not going to be the 51st state.
No, Denmark's not going to let that happen. No, but this kind of rhetoric is new to a lot of people. Consider his various business interests and how he's capitalizing on them. Tesla, SpaceX, XAI, and the Boring Company, and they are the ones we know about. Let's not forget about Starlink. Well invested in the Russia-Ukraine war. He's got ties to both Russia and China. Every which way you look, the man has unfettered political sway. Any of that problematic?
I mean, you'd think so. You'd think that these are concerns to be watched against, right? But again, not unique in our history. And I keep talking about, early and mid 19th century America. If you think about the robber barons in the late 19th century, if you looked at Trump's inauguration, it wasn't just Elon Musk there, it was
Jeff
Facebook,
Bezos.
Right, Bezos, Zuckerberg.
Sitting right behind, yeah.
Like all these folks, kind of the tech bros, billionaires.
But they weren't always front and center like they are. Well, maybe that's worse.
Right. This is a very new circumstance, right, where they're all aligning behind. And you have to think about why that might be, right? Our government, theoretically is designed to manage that, to reduce monopolies, to break up monopolies, to ensure competition under a capitalist society. If you're getting investigated by government agencies, that's a problem for you. So you cozy up to the government and they stop investigating you. How many of those investigations into Tesla do you think that the DOJ is going to continue with through the next 4 years? Probably none.
Zip.
Right. National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, them as well. They have a lot of investigations into Tesla in particular. Is that going to continue? I don't know, right? There are a lot of things benefits that these folks can derive by cozying up to a government, particularly led by Trump, who's open to, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours type of situation.
Although Musk has to be a bit PO'd about Trump's attitude about EVs.
But not necessarily, right? Because if you're the far and away leading electric vehicle producer, there's a bunch of other folks that are way behind you. Mm-hmm. If you've got some headwinds, you can withstand those. Those new developing companies might not be able to. And without those, whether it's the tax break for electric vehicles or whatever it happens to be, other types of government subsidies, Tesla can withstand them. The other companies might not be able to. And in a sense, you're just wiping out the competition.
I hadn't thought about it that way. Worries. An Economist YouGov poll bears that out. The number of Republicans who want Musk and DOGE to have a lot of influence in the Trump administration's fallen significantly to 26%. Same poll taken in the days immediately after Trump's November election win revealed that enthusiasm among Republicans for Musk's role was at 47%. Who's going to rein him in among the Republican hierarchy?
Ultimately, it's going to be Republican voters. And that's the thing. This isn't just voters writ large or people writ large. It's Republicans.
So we go back to the midterms.
You go back to the midterms. And you have to think about this. Most states and most congressional districts, better than 95% of congressional districts are safe districts. They're determined in the primaries. So if I'm a Republican, I don't care what Democrats think. I care what my Republicans in my district think, because that's who I'm going to need to get through a primary election. If those voters turn on Trump or on Musk more likely, that's when you're going to start to see legislators stand up and start to do something. But until that point happens, they're going to go along with it.
Is it the old James Carville attitude, it's the economy, stupid?
Well, it's always the economy. Once the economy goes bad, everything goes out the window, and all of your goodwill built up for everything else just entirely goes away. People stop caring about Israel and Gaza and South Africa and all that stuff once the economy goes into the tank. If that is to happen, all bets are off as far as what happens with Musk and his influence, and I imagine that circle's going to get pretty tight inside of the Trump administration.
There are indications the tech billionaire is getting reminders from the White House that he is still needing to report to the White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles. You talked about this a little while ago. In fact, the president suggested just that publicly, and aides have reported saying the same thing. Musk may not prefer it that way. I mean, he likes doing things the Musk way.
Sure. I mean, do you like to report to your bosses? No.
I don't have a choice, but yeah.
Exactly, right? If I have the ability not to report to my bosses, I just assume do my own thing. Absolutely. Who does? That being said, right, there's a strict hierarchy, and how that gets implemented by Trump, and does Trump stick to that, right? Does Trump go along with this chain of command that has to go through Susie Wiles? Because all it takes is for him to wake up one day and say, you know what, no thanks, I'm out, we're going to do it this way, and everything changes.
I think the answer to that is that he does until Musk presents a vulnerability to Trump. All right, let's talk about that Time magazine cover. If you haven't seen it, there is Elon Musk sitting behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. So Trump was asked about it in an interview, and he kind of dismissed it as like, oh, is Time magazine still in business? You know damn well that he knows that they're still in business. That had to irk him to all get out, but it sent a message because Time is known to be pretty, well, hard on Donald Trump. What Musk is doing, in some ways, could be seen as nothing short of a coup in some people's eyes. There's going to come a point when Donald Trump is going to say to Elon Musk, yo, number one, you're in the spotlight. Number two, you're taking too much power. Number three, who's the boss here?
If that happens, Musk will find himself on the outs with the Trump administration, and this DOGE experiment will disappear. But until that happens, Trump is granting him the authority to do as he wishes with Trump's blessing, that this is going to continue. If Trump wakes up and says, you know what, you're getting too much attention, or if people whisper in Trump's ear, listen, Trump's an anchor, Elon's an anchor around your neck, Trump, you got to get rid of him, then maybe he'll go. But we're a little ways away from that.
Is there any way that Musk could be a formidable opponent to Donald Trump or no?
No, he's not going to run for president, can't. He's not going to, I mean, in the private sector, his ability to marshal his platforms and businesses against the government, maybe. But remember, right, he's gotten tens of billions with a B dollars via SpaceX from the federal government. So, does he want to turn off that spigot? I'm not sure that's something he wants to.
Does he get to a point where he just counts his dollars and go, okay, I got what I wanted, and boom, out of here?
Certainly possible, but there's always more dollars to be made, so he might want to stick around for a while.
Back to the judicial issue. Are we anywhere near the point of constitutional crisis?
Not yet. We'll see. I think you can squint your eyes and look at the horizon and say, yeah, this is coming. But we're not at the precipice just yet, right? Getting up on Twitter and condemning a judge's opinion is one thing. Actively ignoring a federal district judge is a different thing. We've kind of made that next step. Now, what happens? Does this get to the Supreme Court? And then what happens after that is really kind of where these problems,
story.
Right?
I think we may be talking about that.
See you next month.
I look forward to it. And I know you're going to be emailing me. Just understand, we can agree to disagree. And it is my job as a journalist to ask questions. There is no partisan agenda here. Our job is to build upon a solid journalistic foundation and ask the questions that need to be asked. No more, no less. You can revisit this show on demand on the News4JAX YouTube channel and news4jax.com. A lot yet to be written in this saga. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
See why every day more people are choosing News4JAX, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.